Okay. I'll take a shot. So I'm just going to record a little bit of what I'm going to say and a little bit of the site. I might just hand that to you so I don't completely prop out. Yeah, so thanks for coming along. Apologies, I actually arrived 20 minutes earlier, but I did. There was witnesses. There must have been a witness. Hands up if you're my witness. But I forgot my bag, so I actually had to, and I'm on a bike, as you may realise, so I had to cycle home.
Yeah, no, I actually rode past you cycling the other way.
Oh, right, okay. Was I looking worried?
Looking really stressed.
Stressed, okay. Anyway, apologies for being a bit late, but just wanted to, and it's great to see you all. It hasn't rained yet, so everyone is saying that it's going to rain, but it's held off for a bit of time. With all the cloud, we're not going to see the sunrise, obviously, but the sun rises anyway. I mean, it gets a little bit of colour, which I think is a really interesting time of the day. You may have gathered, I like the early mornings, and I really like sunrises. And a really completely clear morning, I don't really like, because there's not much interest in that. Blue skies, the sun rises. But if there's a bit of cloud, what happens is that when the sun is just beneath the horizon, its light is coming up and hitting the underside of the cloud. Do you know that effect? You must have seen it. And what happens is that the sun is not up yet because it's below the horizon, but its light is hitting the underside of the cloud. So you get all of that red, orange kind of colour, but you don't get the glare of actually looking at the sun. So that to me is like a really great moment. And depending on how close the cloud is to the horizon, you get a different kind of colour. So yeah, so I really like that. And of course, we're on the eastern coast of Australia, so sunrise is over the water. Sunset is over the land, and so you kind of come to that. Now, it was interesting.
Lost your video.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. It just it saves energy by going black. Now you're on analog.
I'm flying blind. So you just go.
It's okay. It's okay. My team are not up to scratch yet on this kind of on the technology, but.
Alright.
No, hopefully it's okay as long as it keeps going. But couple of things, and I'm just going to ask you questions. So you're going to have some answers for me, I suppose. First of all, and again, my witness made the comment to me. So when you arrived, where did you go?
I sat right at the top of the hill, and everyone else seemed to kind of go around the outside and circle.
Yeah. Who was the second person who arrived? Did you sit beside? Okay. Because what happens is that people sort of, people come in drifts. Unless you know someone intimately or, closely, you won't sit with them. You'll kind of sit around. But at that edge, people sit at the edge. Why do people sit at the edge? Less exposed. We do that all the time. So when you go into a cafe, people feel more comfortable sitting beside a wall or beside some element, something, anything. It doesn't have to be living. They prefer to sit beside something than they do sitting in the middle of something. So this is kind of interesting characteristics. The other thing was that people sit. Okay, so you're sitting on the edge, and the edge we're talking about is the edge to the trees. So it's almost as far as you can go in height before you actually are in the trees. So that might be another thing. I mean, again, we don't have to think about these things. It's just naturally where we go. And then as more people arrived, there was a density of people. Where was the density of people? Where was the folk I came up to? Yeah, so why did more people sit there? Closer to the footpaths. Was it closer to the footpaths? You gave me a good answer. You gave me a good answer before.
Closest to our site. Because we're all sheep.
Okay, so there is a bit of sheepishness, perhaps. So you arrived and there was more people sitting there, so you went and sat there? Okay, he's nodding. I don't mean to have a go at you. I'm just trying to pull out some answers. But it was also the highest part of the site. So it was on our site. So the reason why I say it's not beside the road is because it wasn't right beside the road. first person to arrive sat near the road. But that bit was actually a good 10, 12 metres away from the road, but it was also at sort of a bit of a cresting moment, so it was probably the higher land. Do we like to sit on higher land? Why? Yep, good. Whoever said that, I missed the... absolutely right, prospect. So you may have heard the words prospect and refuge, but prospect is the ability to see things. Why is it important for us to see things?
Safety.
Safety, good one. Pretty much safety. I mean, you might argue food as well. Gives you a vantage point to see food, but yeah, safety because I can see what's coming. The other half of that is refuge. What does refuge signify? Refuge might be where we are here. I mean, it's a loose thing. We were sitting on prospect, perhaps we've come to refuge. Yeah. Is refuge more dangerous than prospect? Yeah. Why? Absolutely. Because it's not, the escape is not apparent. And you know that in wars, that the army that has the better hand is the one that's on the hill. The one that's down below has got a bit of a fight on their hands, you know. The other thing that's happened is that it's not a very windy day, but is it more or less windy here than over there? Less. Why is that? Sheltered. Simple as that. So if you're sitting on the other side of the hill, and in this case, what direction is that? I mean, I haven't got my compass out actually, but what direction is that? Pretty much. Yeah, can someone actually just locate north for us? I'm guessing north is about there somewhere. Yeah, but I'm wondering if someone can actually locate it on their just so we know. Sort of that way? Yep. So I mean, you could go and have a look at the Bureau of Meteorology weather site and you could see the prevailing winds for Nobbies, which is where our weather station is. People know where Nobbies is? It's on that, I want to call it isthmus, but it was an island at some point, but it became connected. But that's where our weather station is. So it's a little bit exposed out there, but you could go to the Bureau of Meteorology website and you could actually find out what our prevailing wind is here. If you were to guess what our prevailing wind is here, and by prevailing, yeah, it's interesting because it changes through the year. But in terms of a wind, prevailing means more regular, I suppose. Prevailing, it doesn't necessarily mean the strongest wind, the most dangerous wind, but prevailing is actually something that is more common. So what would you think our prevailing wind is here? Where does it come from? Yeah, whoever said that? Yep. I think I haven't checked myself. So we might both be wrong, but I would definitely go with you that it's southeast. Why is that? Could be it's right. It's probably off the ocean, and there's all kinds of effects that the ocean meeting the land has. So first of all, any wind that's moving across the ocean is not going to be stopped by anything. So it's got more of a chance, if there's any kind of wind, it'll keep running. If we get a wind coming from the west, which is often a westerly is often a nasty wind, because it's probably got a bit of power behind it, carries dust and whatever, but to get to us, it's actually got to go over a few mountains and through a few trees and things. So it tends to kind of be dampened by that, not all the time. But on the eastern side, it's not. The other thing is we're in summer, and in the afternoon here, what kind of wind do we get? Nearly you'd almost have to live here to kind of know this, I suppose. But if you lived on the eastern coast of Australia, what happens in the afternoon in terms of wind during summer? Yeah, someone said a nor'easter or an easterly. Do you know why that is? Why is it sort of calm, and then at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, all of a sudden you get this quite fresh breeze coming in off the ocean? Why does that happen? Someone must know.
Is it because of the warmer waters in summer that like storms?
Close. What's actually occurring is that through the summer, the sun is heating up the land and the water at the same time. But the land has actually absorbed, or is actually building up that heat. The water tends to churn it over, and it does warm up, but it tends to sort of dissipate. But the top of the land that's in the sun gets quite hot. What happens to the air that's sitting right on top of that really hot land? It goes up. What comes in to fill the void? The water from the ocean. So, and we often get this thing, and what does the water from the ocean carry? It carries water. It goes up. What happens when steam, essentially water vapor, goes really, really high? If it's a really, really hot day, this is a normal summer situation for us. Yeah, because that moist air is being forced up. What happens when warm air goes right up, maybe a few kilometres up here? Cools down, comes water, ice, sometimes hail, and then we might get a thunderstorm. So there is this sort of cycle kind of thing occurring. And look, I'm not a scientist, and I may not have explained that entirely accurately, and I haven't even done any recent research about it. But I invite you to do that, because knowing those systems is not only important for what we're doing over here, but it's important to understand what the things you're going to build in the environment are going to be up against. And if you can understand some of those patterns, you can work with it. Particularly on this site, because it's quite exposed. And so it's going to be open to these situations that kind of come across it. And I mentioned in the lecture that when people settled in Newcastle, they didn't immediately go to the coast. They came inland. In fact, as we know, there was a building here behind this originally, the hospital, and there was just nothing built here at all. That side was just completely left open. Everyone was living on this side for that idea of shelter. And it becomes quite difficult. And even I've worked on some projects through here, and it's expensive property, and people love to look over the ocean, and it is really beautiful sometimes. But in winter, you're dealing with this wind which is just howling in at you the whole time. And for me, it's a little bit too strong. I like to be in it, but not. I don't want to open up the door, the window, and be flung back by the air trying to rush in, So not many people were over here. It was mainly around shelter, and then we sort of developed this love affair really with the beach, and our technology allowed us to have windows that were sealed and so on. And then we had air conditioners. And as soon as we got air conditioners, no problem. It can be 45 degrees outside, it can be 22 inside. So that then freed us up to sort of go as we want, really. And so we then sort of moved up into the hills and into other places. Okay, so a couple of things. Who owns the land that you're on at the moment? That old chestnut. Come on, who owns it? Council, yeah. Council look after it. So it's council land, so they would look after it. So they would mow the lawns. It would be some public space is always some version of Crown land, so it's actually owned by the Australian government in that sense, but maintained by local councils. So, so what's the difference between public land and private land? Access, yeah.
More people own public land.
Yeah, everyone kind of owns it. So can anyone be stopped from coming here? Not really. So you really, you know, if you want to be here, you can be here. Private land, if I wanted to walk into that apartment, I'd have and knock on the door and say, well, I just want to come inside. That would be a problem, perhaps. So private land has these things that we can that are controlled. It's very different to the way that the Awabakal and many First Nation peoples understood land. They had territory, but they never really had what you would call as private land. Private land is a Western institution. And you might argue that I reckon we've got about 5-10 minutes. It's, you know, that most wars are about property. And, you know, there's some happenings in Ukraine at the moment and other places which are really about property. It's about who owns something. And the original owners of this place, they had their territories and they fought for it, and they had wars and between themselves and all kinds of things. But the idea of private land never existed. And so I found it a really interesting idea that what they actually had was a whole lot of public space. And in fact, what we call the bush, the natural, you know, oh, it's just virgin bush, to them is lost territory. It's been lost. It's no longer maintained. So public space extended not through the areas that they lived, but also in the areas that they gathered food from or that they walked through. And what we would call the bush was actually a form of public space, actually. It was managed. You know, the first colonizers who came here thought, this is an amazing country. This reminded them of the estates in England with grasslands between gum trees, open pasture almost between gum trees. There were areas of rather dense kind of bush where birds lived, edges as they were called, but pretty much the country was open territory. They couldn't believe their eyes, this amazing place. And of course, it didn't take long. As soon as they disrupted the systems, the burning didn't occur. The maintenance of the land that had gone on for thousands of years didn't occur. The weeds came up. The whole system went out of whack. Of course, you've got towns being set up, which then centralised services and all kinds of things, and the whole thing kind of broke down. So what we see as the bush today is actually, you know, I've heard it explained as being lost bush, lost land. It's lost. It's no longer being managed. It's simply being left. And that means you get random plants and all kinds of kind of occurrences. Okay, so a couple of things so I think that that's interesting, and I don't have a whole lot of time here because I think that this is fast approaching, but this idea of public space and what different cultures have made of that public space. And where I feel comfortable enough talking to you in this public space. Do you feel comfortable enough listening to me? How far might we go with that thing? Maybe I should build a little room for myself here so I can talk, and then we can build a shelter over ourselves so we don't get hit by the thunderstorm. Do you think they would let us do that? Why? Don't we own it? Don't we feel comfortable talking in it? You know, so this is the thing that we're also doing is, what's the limitations of what I might be doing? Some of it comes down to being courteous and well-mannered, and that's a really important part of public space, is actually the manners that we have around that. And I used to take an elective to Tokyo before we couldn't travel anymore. And the culture inside a place like Tokyo maintaining public space is incredible. Nothing gets damaged. Everyone is very courteous to each other. And so you get this incredible density of people, the largest city in the world, Tokyo, incredible density, people living together almost in harmony because they're really well mannered with each other and they understand the customs of using their public space. We're a little bit more laissez-faire, which is more free about the way that we do that. But still, we have these constraining sort of ideas. But this project that's been set to you is really to start to interrogate what might be possible in public space such that people can still own it, everyone can own it, but somehow it's allowing you to do more with it. And because we've grown up in a culture where we understand public space to be something like this, and this is a pretty good public space compared to our site, which I think is a little bit too much like the side of a hill, like you're watching a game of cricket or something. It's undervalued for its position and for what it's capable of. It's not being made the most of. You know, so in the park sense, if it was a football team, your best footballer is sitting in the reserve bench over there, not doing very much, and you want to make them a little bit more active in the game. So it is a little bit like that. So a couple of challenges for you today that more relate perhaps to the timepiece. Can you find, or can you stand in any place here that would have been the same 200 years ago? Maybe 230 years ago. What happened 230 years ago? Sorry? Yeah, pretty much. So, there's a bit of a history to that, but convicts escaped from Sydney. They came here, they found coal on the beach. In fact, they found it at Glenrock. First bit of coal ever found by a white person in Australia was found at Glenrock, which is, Glenrock Beach, which is just down here. Newcastle Beach, they found coal on the beach. The Awabakal people had a Dreamtime story about coal. So they knew about coal, and they used coal in different ways. But the first people who came here were actually miners, and it was before Newcastle was even a town. It was just kind of a whole lot of mining, people just picking stuff up on the ground, really, a bit of excavation. Then it became a penal settlement. Governor King came here, and I think that was around about 1818 or something, or 1808. It was set up as a penal colony, and then the town was laid out as we see it now a bit later by Dangar and so on in the sort of the 1850s and so on. But Watt Street, which runs from the harbour right up to the top of King Edward Park, that was a track, that was an Awabakal track. And if you cycle or walk, the easiest way to get from the harbour to the top of the hill, or if I had to walk to Lake Macquarie, I would walk up Watt Street. It's still a bit of a climb, but it's the one area where it's the most gentle. It's very obvious that was an Awabakal track. And what happened? Where was the first road in Newcastle built by the white people? Watt Street. So Watt Street is actually a remnant. And in fact, the only surviving street of the early days of Newcastle is Watt Street. All the other streets that they set up were dismantled when Dangar laid out his grid. So the grid of Newcastle picks up Watt Street and heads that way. So the geometry of that actually resonates back into Awabakal times. There's nothing unusual about that. Like if you've got to manage property, you're not going to be silly and go up the sides of hills or go around cliff edges with things falling down. You're going to go up some, gentle rising country. So, challenge is, can you find an area that would have been like it still exists, like 230 years ago? If you look around, can you take a guess at anything? What was that? No. Why wasn't the tree here 230 years ago? Hadn't been planted, yeah. Well, it's not a native. Well, I'm guessing it's not a native. So 230 years ago, there was pretty much no white people here. So the Awabakal were just living here. And they would have managed the land completely differently. They would have burnt it, done different things, and up it would have grown. Can you feel that wind? So what's happening? It's about to rain, isn't it? So today, in the rain, walk around, try and find things that are, and try and guess their age. Try and think about how old things are. And all the time, think about how this thing might work. And it's really interesting. Now we're out in the open. If it was a fine day, it would be sunny and then more sunny, and then we'd start casting shadows. But because there's a storm coming, you can feel that anticipation, can't you? You can feel this moment actually start to arrive. And that's the importance too of being outside, is actually starting to get it. Oh, I'm under the tree. I'm being a little bit protected, but I can see you guys are getting wet. Okay, so to save you out of the rain,
I actually love to be in the rain.
thanks.
It's a nice bike apart from the fact that it's a road one.
It's a gravel bike.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah.
How do I say that?
Oh, okay, thanks.
What makes a gravel bike a gravel bike? Because I haven't actually heard of it